So Shazam is the latest film in the DC universe, and I went into the film with not really high expectations based on a few trailers I'd seen. I thought it kind of looked a bit lame, to be honest. And I've got to say, my expectations were completely flipped upside down because this is actually a pretty good film. I think this is one of the better superhero films I've seen in recent memory, actually. So the story is based around this wizard named Shazam who lives in this magical underground temple who keeps abducting people, and he's attempting to look for a new champion to replace the old champion that kind of betrayed him and unleashed the 7 deadly sins on Earth. And the film shows that the first child, named Thad, isn't worthy of becoming the champion, so he gets banished back to Earth. And years later, Mark Strong plays him as an adult, and he's become this obsessive, do whatever it takes to find out how to get back there and become the champion, because he's kind of forced himself to believe that he is worthy his whole life, because he was told by his father he was never worthy. He was told by the magical wizard Shazam that he's not worthy, so he's took it upon himself to pretty much waste his entire life to become this next Shazam. But instead he steals the Eye of Sin, unleashing the 7 deadly sins once again, and they now are like his champions, so they are like controlled by him. And as a villain, I think Mark Strong plays him really quite well. I think he's an entertaining villain that has an interesting motive behind him, because he now wants to become the real Shazam after he finds out that there is someone else out there that was the chosen one. And of course, he's very jealous of this because he's spent his whole life trying to become this thing, and to find out some random kid who's only 14 becomes it makes him quite power hungry. And I do think the film takes a little while to get going, because obviously I've just explained all of this intro. This is quite a lengthy beginning before you actually get to the point where Billy becomes Shazam himself. Although I don't really think it's all worthless. I think it's a decent build-up, but I think it probably could have been a little bit shorter. Because once you actually get to Billy becoming Shazam, I think the film starts flowing quite a little bit better. There's a lot more humor. There's a lot more of a purpose to what's going on. You kind of see Billy as a character grow. You see him also like take the wrong directions in some cases, where he's using his powers in the wrong way to kind of get fame and to get, a lot of people like worshipping him and stuff. Which I think is an interesting dynamic that I don't know if is really shown or explored in many other superhero films, because I think this is actually way more realistic than what you usually get in a superhero film, where the person is trying to discover who they are. They need to be the best who they can be. Whereas here he's essentially just the same person who's not really sure what to do with the powers he has. And I think if anything, that is the most realistic approach to take with a superhero character. He's certainly a good person, but just because you're a good person doesn't mean you know how to use your priorities and become responsible in the smartest way. Also, as well, with him being like a 14-year-old kid, he's not particularly great at the fighting aspect, when obviously Mark Strong's character comes and finds him and constantly is trying to, take back his power that he thinks he rightfully deserved. Shazam is kind of a bit clunky, a bit awkward, reminding me a little bit of Spider-Man from Spider-Man Homecoming, where he's just not really fit for fighting and doesn't really know how to utilize his powers properly yet. And that was the one thing I liked from Spider-Man Homecoming, because it wasn't just, I'm the strongest superhero in the world, and I can beat you up with my super strong fists and punch you in the face, and bam, bam, bam. Oh yeah, well I can also do this. I'm going to punch you in the face, bam. It's just a bit more like realistic fighting, where he's just a little all over the place, not really sure how to handle himself, and mostly just running away from the situation. And there's also another aspect of the film that I quite liked as well, where his backstory, his family life is a little bit of a messed up situation. He doesn't know who his mum is. He's been running from foster homes constantly since he was a really young child. And I know superhero films do this quite often where, like, the superhero doesn't know where they came from, or they don't know their parents, or their father died at a young age, or their mother died. Like, that kind of thing's quite common for superheroes. But I just like the way it's explored in this film, where he's starting to realize that, the people around him care for him way more than his mother, who actually never passed away or anything. She just wasn't a good mother, and she just gave him up and just literally let him walk away, and just thought, you know what, I'm just going to let him go. And at first that seems completely stupid to me, because I thought, well, no way would a mother ever just let their child walk away like that. But when it's actually explained that she was just very young, she doesn't really know how to raise a child, that kind of thing, it just kind of brings a very realistic human element to what can happen in real life. Shazam also has a good sidekick in the film, his friend Freddy. I think their little dynamic is really good too. There is this one scene though where they're side the table and they're arguing about like the superhero thing. That seemed really out of place, because at that point in the film they're supposed to be keeping it a secret, but yet they just burst out into this big argument at the dinner table. It really felt completely stupid, to be honest, but at least everything else in the film between them I thought was really quite good. I think all the foster home friends add a nice dynamic too. I mean, they're pretty solid characters for the most part. They don't all add, the most interesting dynamic to the story, but they're at least worthwhile, and they at least help the story progress to make Shazam become who he is and realize that he needs to stay grounded and understand that the people around him are the ones that care for him the most. So yeah, I think the film explores some really interesting themes. I mean, no, it's not like done in a particularly deep way that makes me, question things or think about things. I just think for a superhero film, it does what it does in a way that not many other superhero films recently have done, in my opinion. For example, take the film Avengers from last year, Infinity War. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a bad film. I didn't think it was a bad film at all. But the issue for me is that there's so many characters in that film that I can't find myself becoming invested in any individual character. So if there's anyone that dies or anyone that's in danger or anything, I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever, who cares? Because I just don't have an investment in the character. Whereas a film like this explores the characters in a pretty good way, to the point where you do start to feel like, yeah, I kind of care about this character. But yeah, there are some cheesy jokes at the beginning especially that kind of made me wince a little bit, and some of the dialogue at times isn't particularly all that great, but I think there are so many funny moments, especially when, Shazam is kind of like finding out who he is and stuff. I think that's pretty interesting. But in terms of like criticisms, I guess the whole bully thing was pointless. Like, Freddy gets knocked over by a car, and it's just like, why did this happen? This is so stupid. Also, when Billy becomes Shazam and basically almost immediately convinces Freddy that he is who he says he is, was a little bit of a reach, I think. Like, maybe Freddy is a bit of a gullible kid, and I get that, but just probably should have taken a little bit more to convince him than it actually did. And without spoiling too much, there's a scene where the characters find out something, and the way they find out something that's actually really major to the story is a little weak. The way they find out, like, it's just so conveniently placed that I just don't think it would have been that easy realistically. But it's still just pretty much minor issues, that I have. I think the last act of the film takes quite a brave direction as well, which I again won't spoil, but I think there's something that you will either find really cheesy and a little over the top, or maybe a bit of a reach, but I actually think it took a direction that was pretty brave and pretty unique and actually worked in favor of the film, and I'm quite happy that the film took the direction that it did. So yeah, as you can tell, I actually quite liked this film. I thought it was decent. It was entertaining. The action scenes weren't anything special, but they were what they needed to be, I think, for this film. And yeah, I think pretty much a solid superhero film all around. I'm going to go 6 out of 10, and definitely interesting to see if this is going to be, a character that has a bit more of an influence in this universe, because DC's typically pretty poor these days. But I think this could be a good standard to set the pace for the next following films in this universe, and even beyond that, to be honest. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I think it is a good film, and if you did, let me know. If you didn't like it at all, also let me know. Any thoughts you've got, comment. Thank you for watching. Have a good day, and goodbye.